Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen. Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London.
Dick Whittington and his cat. Once upon a time, more than 500 years ago, there lived in a country village a poor orphan boy named Dick Whittington. Seeing that both his parents were dead and that he was so poor, the people of the parish gave him food and clothing and much kindness. But they were not rich themselves, so Dick had only the simplest of food and the most homely of clothing. When he heard of the great city of London, with its towers and churches and its streets paved with gold, for that is what the people of the village said, he had a great longing to go and see it. But of course he had no idea how a poor village boy such as he would ever travel all that way to the city of London. Now one day there was a jingling of bells in the village street, and a huge hay wagon drawn by 2 horses pulled up at the inn. The wagoner got down to refresh himself and his horses, and Dick, seeing that he was friendly, fell to talking with him. "Where are you going to?" asked Dick. "Why, London town, to be sure," said the wagoner. "That must be a wonderful place," said the boy. "How I should like to go there." The wagoner saw how eager Dick was, and after he'd talked to the good people with whom Dick was staying, he offered to take him to London on his wagon, to look after him while he was in London, and bring him back the next time he passed through that village. So Dick put his few belongings in a bundle and joined the wagoner on the seat behind the 2 horses. Then the wagoner cracked his whip, there was a jingling of bells, and they set off on the road to London. When they reached the city, Dick looked about him and saw the great houses and the tall churches, but above all he looked for the streets paved with gold, for he had seen 2 or 3 golden crowns at the village at home, and he knew they were worth a great deal. So he thought that he would only have to stoop down and scrape and chip some pieces of gold from the pavements to make himself rich enough to live comfortably and have decent clothes, good food, and perhaps a snug cottage or a shop. Besides, he'd be able to repay all the people of his parish who had been so good to him. The wagon pulled up at an inn in the city, and while the driver went inside, Dick jumped down from the seat and began to look round. He was sure that those golden streets were just round the corner, but they were not. So he explored a little farther, and a little farther, and to make a long story short, he lost himself and couldn't find his way back to the wagon. Evening came on, and poor Dick was so tired that he crept into a corner and curled up on a doorstep and went to sleep. Next morning he began to walk the streets looking for all the wonderful sights he had been told about. But he saw little more than streets of brick houses and poor people on their way to work. Presently he began to feel very hungry and was forced to beg halfpence from the passers-by. But most of them had little to give him except unkind words. Many asked why he didn't seek for work. So when he had spent his few halfpence on bread and milk, he started asking where he could get employment so as to earn board and lodging. He trudged wearily about till he came to some fields at the edge of the city, and there he found a farmer who was willing to give him, in exchange for his services as haymaker, his food and drink and a pile of straw in a shed where he could spend the night. The work was hard, but he was well fed and comfortable. At last, however, haymaking was over, and the farmer had no more work for him. So back he tramped along the streets of the city looking for more work. For 3 days he did this, but he had no luck. No one would employ him or give him so much as a crust of bread to keep him from starvation. At length, worn out and fainting from sheer exhaustion, he sat down upon a doorstep and fell asleep. The door belonged to the house of a rich merchant, Mr. Fitzwarren, who had made a great fortune by trading with distant lands. When Mr. Fitzwarren's cook opened the door, she saw Dick huddled there in his rags and roused him up with her broom, for she was a sour, cruel woman and could not abide the sight of a ragged, dirty vagabond. "Get you gone, you idle, loafing brat," she cried. "What are you doing on a respectable gentleman's threshold, I should like to know? Looking out for a chance to sneak something, I dare say." Poor Dick had no strength to answer, but struggled to his feet, only to drop down once more on the pavement, for he was nearly dead from starvation. Just at that moment the merchant himself, Mr. Fitzwarren, returned home. He was a kind-hearted gentleman, and was distressed to see Dick in such a wretched condition at his doorway. He asked Dick why he didn't go home, or return to his master, and when he learnt, from the broken words which escaped the boy's lips, that he had neither home nor master, he ordered the cook to take him in, give him food and clean clothing, and allow him to stay in the house as long as he needed. When Dick had eaten and rested, Mr. Fitzwarren saw that he was a decent, well-grown lad, though thin and weak from lack of food, and he ordered that he should be given work as a scullery boy. The cook did not hold with this, for she had taken a dislike to Dick, but she was obliged to obey her master's orders. Dick got on well enough in spite of the cruel cook, who never lost the opportunity of tormenting him in little ways, like spilling hot, greasy water over his feet and giving him all the unpleasant jobs to do. But the merchant's daughter, Alice, took pity on Dick, for she was a sweet-natured girl and liked the look of the orphan. So she told the cook that if she went on being unkind to Dick, she would see that her father dismissed her from his service. After this, the cook contented herself for the most part with saying unkind and spiteful things to Dick whenever no one was listening. Now it happened that Dick had been given a bare and chilly garret to sleep in, and there were holes in the walls through which rats and mice came at night and woke him up from sleep. They scampered over his bed and nibbled at his fingers if they happened to be showing outside the bedclothes. From time to time Alice gave him little presents, and one day she gave him a penny. He went out into the street, and there he saw a girl carrying a black cat in her arms. "How much will you take to sell your cat?" he asked. "I don't know that I want to sell him," answered the girl. "He's a very good mouser." "Oh, please let me have him," asked Dick. "A good mouser is exactly what I want." "Well, how much will you give me for him?" asked the girl. "I've only a penny in the world," said Dick, "but that I'll gladly give you if you'll sell me the cat." Well, the girl took pity on Dick, even though she didn't really want to sell Puss. So she took Dick's penny and gave him the cat. Dick kept him in his garret and fed him on scraps of food and saucers of milk which he saved from his own meals and took secretly upstairs from the kitchen. And very soon Puss had chased away all the rats and mice, and Dick was able to sleep in peace. Dick and his cat grew very fond of each other, and when he was not watching the mouse holes in the floor, Puss would curl up on the end of Dick's bed and keep himself warm. One day Mr. Fitzwarren called all his servants together and told them he was sending a new venture to sea, and they might all join in if they liked. His ship was going to the Barbary coast, laden with a cargo of goods to exchange for precious merchandise. All the servants might send something of their own with the ship, and take their due share of the profits when it returned. Some sent jewels and trinkets, others sent dresses, and others sent money which they'd saved out of their wages. Only Dick did not appear before his master, for he alone had nothing to send on the voyage. But Alice noticed that he was not there, so she sent for him and asked him if he too would like to risk something with the venture. Dick told her he had nothing at all to send, so Alice said she would give him some money. But her father said that every servant must send something of his own. It could not be given him by another. Then Alice thought of Dick's cat and told him to send that. "Very well," said Dick, though the idea of parting from Puss made him very sad. "I will send Puss if you think he will be of any use." "Of course he will," cried Alice eagerly. "He'll keep the rats and mice out of the ship." So Dick said goodbye to his cat, and next day the cat was taken aboard the ship, which soon set sail for the Barbary coast. The loss of his cat made Dick very unhappy, and once more the rats and mice began to keep him awake at night, so that he was sometimes late for work in the morning. His friend Alice went away to stay in the country for a while, and the unkind cook once more began to treat Dick with cruelty. Not only did she show him every possible unkindness, she even sneered at him about his cat. "Fancy sending a creature like that on a voyage," she said. "Why, how much do you think he'll sell for? Just about enough to buy a stick to beat with, I should say." At last Dick could stand it no longer. He had lost his cat, he had lost his friend and protector Alice, and the cook was once more as unkind to him as ever. So he packed his few small belongings in a handkerchief and set out upon the road one morning as soon as it was light. It was the morning of All Hallows' Day, and soon he reached Highgate, where he sat down by the roadside and wondered which way to go. All roads were the same to him, and he could not make up his mind. Then all at once, in the silent morning air, he heard the sound of far-off bells. They were the bells of Bow Church in Cheapside, and as Dick listened to them they seemed to be speaking to him. And this is what they said.
Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen. Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London.
Over and over again the bells seemed to be saying the same thing. Lord Mayor of London, repeated Dick to himself. Well, if that's what's in store for me, there's hope yet. So he stood up, shouldered his bundle, turned round to face the way he had come, and began to tramp back towards the city. On and on he went, the sound of Bow bells still ringing in his head, until he reached his master's house. The household was beginning to stir, and Dick managed to creep indoors unnoticed and begin his day's work just as the cook was coming down the stairs to get breakfast ready. Meanwhile, poor Dick's cat was making himself useful on board Mr. Fitzwarren's ship, the Unicorn. The voyage was a long one, and there were rats and mice among the cargo, but Puss chased them to their holes and killed as many as he could. Soon the captain and all the crew knew what a fine and clever cat he was. At last they reached the Barbary coast, where the brown-skinned Moors live. The ship put into a harbour, and the captain was told that he must go and pay his respects to the king who reigned in that part of the country. There was great excitement among the Moorish people at the waterside, for most of them had never set eyes on white people before. The captain of the Unicorn was led to the royal palace past the tall black guards and into the presence of the king. The king told him he might bring his goods to the royal palace, where he would examine them and see whether he wished to buy them. Then he was led into a great dining hall, where a banquet had been prepared in his honour. The king and queen, the captain of the ship, and the people of the royal household sat down upon the cushions and rugs which lay upon the floor, for such was the custom of the country. No sooner had the servants brought the rich dishes of spiced meat, rice, and fruit, and placed them before the guests, than there was a scurrying sound from behind the curtains, and out ran a great horde of rats and began to devour the food upon the dishes. They took little notice of the servant who tried to chase them away, and it was with the greatest difficulty that any of the ladies and gentlemen were able to take food. "What a great nuisance these rats must be to your majesty," said the captain. "Are you often plagued in this way?" "Sir," said the King of Barbary with a sigh, "every mealtime is the same. My wise men and doctors have been consulted, but there is no remedy against these monsters. I would give the half of my wealth to anyone who could rid me of this pest." "In England," said the captain, "there is a little creature who is kept in our homes especially for killing and eating rats. It is called a cat. Have you no cats in this country?" The king asked him to describe the creature, but no one had ever heard of anything like it in Barbary. He asked where a cat might be found. "We have one, your majesty," answered the captain, "on board my ship. But of course he is a most valuable animal, for we have rats and mice among the ship's stores, and he is the only means of keeping them down." "Oh, what would I not give to possess that creature," sighed the king. "He'd be a great blessing to me and all my household." "Well," said the captain, who had an eye to business and knew that the King of Barbary was a fabulously wealthy man, "well, your majesty, what would your majesty give?" The king considered. "Bring him to my palace this evening," he said, "and let us see what he can do. If he can perform what you say he can, I will make you an offer." Well, that same evening the captain carried Puss carefully under his arm to the royal palace and was once more admitted to the banqueting hall. Another feast was about to begin. As soon as the food was set down by the servants, the rats rushed upon it from all sides. But Puss did not have to be told what to do. She sprang from the captain's grasp, leapt straight at the nearest rat, a large brown fellow who was in the act of carrying off a piece of meat, and killed him instantly. The same fate befell a dozen more of the thieves, and the rest scuttled off behind the curtains and appeared no more. The king, the queen, and all the royal household looked on in amazement. "Well," said the King of Barbary, "if I had that creature, there would not be a rat in the palace in a week's time." "Indeed, my dear," said the Queen, "you must have him. Indeed, you must. Offer this brave captain whatever he wants." So the king offered to buy the whole cargo of the Unicorn for a fair price, and in addition to give 10 times this sum for the cat. The captain considered this a handsome offer, and one well worthy of such a great ruler, so he accepted it without argument. Next day the whole crew were feasted at the palace. The cargo was brought on shore and sold in exchange for gold and jewels, and a special casket of exceedingly rare and precious stones was given to the captain in exchange for puss. Then the ship once more set sail and made for England. One fine morning Mr. Fitzwarren, the London merchant, was sitting in his counting-house when there came a knock at the door. "Good news! Good news for Mr. Fitzwarren!" said a voice, and in came the captain of the Unicorn, followed by the mate, bearing a heavy casket and a paper showing the contents of the ship. "Your ship is come home, sir," said the captain. "This is what we've brought back from the coast of Barbary." The merchant welcomed the captain, ordered wine to be fetched for him and the mate, and examined the list of goods they had brought back. Then the captain told Mr. Fitzwarren about Dick Whittington's cat, and opened the casket of jewels which the King of Barbary had given in exchange for him. Pleased as the merchant had been with the success of his own venture, he was even more pleased at Dick's good fortune. He turned to one of his servants. "Send for Mr. Whittington at once," he said. Dick was at the moment cleaning pots for the cook, and he was covered with grease and smuts, but just as he was, he obeyed his master's summons. When the merchant ordered a chair to be placed for him and told him to sit down, he was afraid he was being made fun of. But Mr. Fitzwarren told him what had happened, gave him his great riches, and begged him to keep them in a place of safety. Dick begged his master to take a share in the jewels on account of his kindness to him, but Mr. Fitzwarren refused. "No," he said, "it's all yours, and I wish you joy of it. As for me, I have all I want, and it gives me great happiness to see you so fortunate." Then Dick tried to give part of his wealth to Miss Alice, who had always been kind to him and taken his part, but she would have none of it. So Dick gave the ship's captain and the mate and all his fellow servants, even the cruel cook, handsome presents all round, for he was not one to keep all his fortune to himself. And they all thanked him and drank his health and wished him success. Dick bought himself good clothes from a tailor, and when he was clean and neat and well-dressed, he was as handsome a young fellow as any in the city of London. Mr. Fitzwarren begged him to stay on in his house until he could find one for himself, and presently he began to see that his daughter Alice and young Dick Whittington had grown fond of each other. Dick had always given Alice such presents as he could afford, and she had always been kind and loving towards him. So, to make a long story short, Dick Whittington and Alice Fitzwarren were married soon afterwards, and a great wedding feast was held, to which the Lord Mayor of London, the Sheriff, and the Aldermen were invited. They lived in a house of their own in great style and comfort, and Mr. Whittington became one of the most popular and prosperous citizens in the town. Not long afterwards, so history tells us, he became sheriff and was knighted by the King of England, and 3 times Sir Richard Whittington became Lord Mayor of London. And each time he was chosen Lord Mayor, he thought of that All Hallows Day many years before, when he sat by the roadside wondering where in the world to go, and the sound of bow bells had come to him through the clear winter air, and they'd sounded like voices saying to him,
"Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen. Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London."